Record Store Day is a once a year special event. All the records that come out on Record Store Day, all the new records that come out on Record Store Day only come out that day, and they come out in extremely limited editions. The overwhelming majority is stuff that's never come out before. So it might be, say, a Johnny Cash or a Grateful Dead concert that no one's ever heard or ever been on vinyl, and they'll print 1,000 of them worldwide on marbled vinyl and special packaging, and let's say it retails for $40. Those records end up being $200 and $300 records because everybody wants them, but there's only 1,000 of them. And the whole thing is meant to motivate you to go to a physical record store, not a big chain, but more just like these little mom and pop shops like I have. Those are the only ones that can get those records. By the time we opened, the line was curled around the block.
Got rid of all the donuts, man. That's like 50 donuts.
That happened. I got you. So if you pull it out of the Record Store Day rack and then you decide you're going to pass, just put it back.
In essence, be respectful.
That's right, yeah. Hey guys, we back there just a couple of things.
You know,
what I'm saying? Also, please don't take Record Store Day records away from the Record Store Day rack area. If you pull one, you decide you don't want it, please just put it back in that area so we don't find it a week later in the bargain section or something like that. Two, please don't take the Record Store Day records away from the rack area, that area. If you decide, you pull something, you're like, better not, just put it back in that area. Like the top of each title, please don't take Record Store Day records away from that area.
1, 2, 3. Let's do it. Let's do it. All right. Oh no.
Not surprising that it's hung on, but it's surprising to me that it's kind of, that it's gained popularity the way that it has. The artwork on a record is bigger, obviously, than on a CD or a cassette tape. And so that's why I kind of started collecting records instead of cassettes. Me and my old roommate one time went and counted like 50 of them and made a marker for that and went through and measured it that way. So I've never counted them out. I think in the living room, we kind of estimated it to be about maybe 12,000.
I say I've got around 4,000 records. Of course, I've been saying that for a while, but I think that's about right because when I can, I try to keep a record of everything that I have so that I don't necessarily buy 12 copies of the same album, although I have multiple copies of the same album. Yeah, wait, what was that question again? I have the first 2 records I ever bought, and I still own them. And I'm not really sure how I've been able to keep them, but I was 10 years old. And the very first record I bought was the new Mickey Mouse Club. And this was in 1977. What I've discovered is that in searching for vinyl, a lot of musical genres open up to you. And so what I've done is like listen to things that I was never listening to before.
I've been to Brazil and I did some digging there, and I've been to Argentina and Buenos Aires probably about 3 times. And there I also found records from other countries there. And then just like here in the United States, I found a lot of just random records from around the world. My first record, I remember that was a 45 of Nitty Gritty Dirt Bands, Have You Heard of the Lonesome Loser, which is an absolutely horrible record. With records, it's pretty awesome because you can find things that have never been released on CD and is never going to be on like the iTunes Store or Spotify whatsoever. So that's pretty magical.
I was such a junkie that I would get my paycheck, and this is for like 25 years. I'd put my paycheck in the bank and I'd go right to the record store and I'd buy 2 to 3, 4 albums every Friday. Every Friday. I thought I would give it to our son, and my wife said, "You're not going to burden our son with that record collection."
So I had a friend who was a mutual friend of Franklin's who said, you know, I know a guy who's got a massive and beautiful vinyl collection, and he's thinking about selling it, and he's not really sure what to do with it. And I said, I want to meet him.
He came and looked at the collection. I think he was impressed. I mean, I think he said, "Wow, this is a nice collection."
Wow, I've never seen anything that was really collected in that way, and that was kept that clean and beautiful. The thing that I was amazed about most was that every single one is sleeved in a plastic sleeve. It's not a cheap thing to do.
When I had to move him home, I was concerned for the best care for him. I researched vinyl storage, what's the optimum humidity, what's the optimum temperature range to store records for long periods of time. I think it was like 55% humidity. So I just bought a dehumidifier, put it down there, set it for in the 50s, and it runs pretty much every day at some point.
By Diana Ross, and you're listening to it on the KUAF Vinyl Hour. Good evening. Thank you for joining me. My name is Lee Wood, and
I'm not a collector on the level where, like, you know, how valuable certain records are, or like an original pressing versus a reissue, or like any of that stuff. I'm not really into that stuff that much. Okay, that was Beethoven's Fifth from a band called Exception. And this is the KUAF Vinyl Hour. Thank you for joining me this evening. I'm sitting here with Scott Flanagan.
Hello.
Welcome, Scott.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you for coming. We've been kind of talking about this for a while.
Yes, we have.
But we're busy people.
Very busy.
And it takes a while. And it was almost, it was meant to be, I think, because it was... It is a weekly program, and it's a music program, but it's all vinyl. Often we ask people that we know have vinyl collections in the community to come in, you know, pick 8 to 10 records that they want to play, and then they come and play their songs and we talk about it. And I was like, well, I think he probably, you know, maybe we don't know about him. Maybe he did the one album because he was kind of a drug guy.
Right, but
No.
he's
No.
way too focused.
And prolific.
Yes,
Like-
in many ways.
Yeah. And he's a marathon runner. Like,
Yeah, that's right,
yeah.
a marathon runner.
Because a lot of people within the community who collect vinyl were on that show and I knew them, I think they kept mentioning my name to Lee to say, you really ought to get Scott Flanagan on. He's got a big collection. So Lee said, do you want to do a show? And I'm like, yes, I'd love to do a show. What do we do? And she's like, I don't know, you know, let's give it some thought. And I thought about, let's do cover songs. I love cover songs. I love hearing one band do something in a completely different way than it was originally done.
Okay, and that's going to begin our night of cover songs.
Excellent.
Okay. We've got a stack here, and we intentionally decided to choose as we're going along, which I think is the right decision to make. And so I think that we should go next. And I'm just going to jump in and
Do it.
take control. Ooh, I want to listen to this.
This is one of my favorites.
There's so much too that's like, I fill in all these spaces, which is part of the fun for me. He's a record producer. He only puts out one record. This is what he chooses to do for the track one, side one.
So he did a lot of recording engineering. So he's a record engineer too. So a producer. And I'm a sucker for drums.
That was Savoy Truffle. My mind's been exploded. By Terry Manning. Just incredible. Incredible.
Yeah. Blew me away first time I heard it, and I've listened to it so many times since then.
Yeah. The show's more fun for me because I like to talk to people about music. Like, probably more than the average person. So it's really fun because I get to learn about people through the music that they listen to. And also because records are so tangible, they just have such a physical presence. There's a story usually around where you bought it or why you got it or if you inherited it or if a friend gave it to you. So it usually has a story that comes with it. And there's a lot that you can talk about while you're also listening to this music that you love. So it's not just the story even of the song, it's the story of how you got the song. So when you were saying that like you didn't remember buying it or that you maybe hadn't heard it or like listened to it before, my thought was, okay, so the cover must have gotten you.
Right, and that's what I think. So when I look at it, I'm like, what turned me on to this album? The cover, which is really interesting, and orange and green, and then the picture of the...
I had so much fun doing that. It was a blast. And in fact, I've done it again since then with another show. I will continue to do the vinyl hour as long as they'll let me.
I think vinyl is a superior format. I'm saying if you've got a clean record and a high-res stream or file, and you play them back-to-back on the same quality system, and we do this all the time, you pick the vinyl every time.
Analog is a more relaxed frequency spread. CDs and MP3s are compressed, and LPs are uncompressed. And so it's a more natural sound.
I don't know. It sounds pretty good. The people that insist on that always find it pretty obnoxious. I do like listening to records a whole lot. It's just sort of a rhythm.
Music Cognition Lab is a group of faculty and students who work together using various kinds of behavioral methodologies and other kinds of techniques to try to understand how people make sense of music. We had one study that actually started out as an honors thesis, and what she did is just brought people in and played them pairs of performances of the same piano piece. And she'd tell them, now you're going to hear a world-renowned concert pianist play this piece. And then they'd hear it. And she'd tell them, and now you're going to hear a conservatory student of piano play this piece. And then they'd hear it. And they'd be asked things like, which one did you like better? And unbeknownst to them, sometimes they were just the same exact performance of the same piece. Overall, people preferred the ones that they'd been told were professional, regardless of their actual, who'd actually performed them. So there's been a lot of work there that might even shed more direct light on this, because it's sort of about how much of the perception comes from the sound itself and how much comes from your expectations and the kind of setting. Because I think when people think about vinyl, they think about just a whole different place and way of listening to music.
That's Charlotte Franklin on the fiddle. Mr. Satan, he got mad. He missed the soul he thought he had. Pharaoh's army got drowned. Oh, Mary, don't you weep. Brothers and sisters, don't you cry. There'll be good times by and by. Pharaoh's army got drowned.
There are basically two really popular ways that people, or really standard ways people go about recording an album. And both take a lot of work and time, just in completely different ways. So you can either do like individual tracking, every single person goes into a booth, does the part a million times until it's perfect, and that does end up sounding oftentimes a little bit more manufactured, but it gives you the ability to start over. So that takes longer. That'll always take longer to do individual tracking, just because, you gotta spend sometimes 10 hours just on drums, and depending on how long you're recording and how much you're recording. Versus being able to go in, full band, knock out 5 songs together in one day. But the other side of that is you have to practice so much to be able to go into a recording studio and get something live that you're happy with. We don't even get a check from Spotify until we hit, a certain amount of plays. Even then, it'll be like $20, which is sometimes still less than the price of a record, especially a new record. It's an investment. It's an investment that a lot of bands that aren't quite there yet can't make.
There is kind of a set fixed cost that's across the industry that everybody's kind of beholden to. We're manufacturing, we're one step of 10 steps. So in those other 9, everybody has a separate business that relies on it. So most of the plants today and over the last few years, 4 months, 6 months, 9 months, a year to get a record in your hand. So if you're an independent artist, the thought of I can't get my records for 6 months from the time I need to have the record out, it's unbelievable. So they just check it off the list, I can't do it. So we eliminate, of course, the speed. We're doing everything in sometimes about 5 to 6 weeks. The smaller guys, the guys like me, right, or my band would be, it's 300 unit guys, 500 unit guys. We very actively every day say, yes, well, of course we'll take these 300 unit, 500 unit jobs, which in all honesty, if it was the bottom line dollars cents, you really wouldn't want to take anything under 1,000 units. CDs are pretty much business cards at this point. The freebies, but a t-shirt costs about $5-6 and a vinyl record costs about $5 to $6. That's the bottom line. If you saw what a digital WAV file looks like on a computer and the picture of it, it goes like this and goes up and down. If you looked at the actual grooves on a turntable through the microscope, like the cutting engineer, the mastering engineer, that's what mastering is. He's cutting in real time those grooves. So it's cutting those squiggly lines, highs, lows, mids.
The machines are amazing. They are automated, they do have a brain, but we want to make sure people know that the process itself still lends itself to human interaction. You take a vinyl pellet, and those are obviously room temperature. We buy them a ton at a time, and you feed those into a hopper. And from that hopper, they are heated into almost a goo, a toothpaste, if you will. So an extruder does that work. We send them through a little mold to make what looks a bit like a hockey puck. So it's basically your baby record. That is fed into the actual press itself. You talk about pressing records. So it's obviously a very heavy press. It's very hot. And at that point, the hockey puck gets a label and a B label applied. The press happens, and just imagine that stuff just squishing out into this flat record. The record is not perfectly round at that point. It has jagged edges, so there's obviously a little bit of extra plastic used to make that. And we trim that off, and then that extra flash can go into the recycle where we can use it again for certain things. So the record is now smooth. It's gone through what we call the trimming station, and it goes to, it's picked up by a suction arm. It goes over to one of the two cooling stations or spindles, and it sits there. And it continues to dry a little bit or cool off, so it continues to get as flat as it's going to eventually be. Voila, you have the finished product. At that point, you could actually take it off and put it on the turntable immediately. So the next thing is putting these dry records, these spindles of records, they're usually about 100 at a time, onto these carts. The carts are rolled over to the packing line, and the packing line assembles them. There might be a sleeve into a jacket, and maybe there's something a little fancier. Maybe there's some download cards. A lot of different things could happen there, but eventually they're shrink wrapped. All that is done. They're put into some custom boxes that we developed that holds the records just perfectly and protect them if they're going to be shipped, because records are a bit fragile, and they're heavy, by the way. So at that point, you're done. You're packed up, and the last piece of that is shipping.
In the last 10 years, I think people are really drawn to it because it is tangible, and people put work into the artwork and the packaging, and it can be really beautiful.
I really think that vinyl records and the analog signal is not a perfect thing, and music shouldn't be perfect. I don't like perfect music, so I'd rather hear it live and breathe like a human in a room.
And I'm just kind of a super fan. I never really intended for it to get this big.
When you start collecting vinyl and people know that you collect vinyl, all of a sudden people are like, hey, my dad had some old records. Would you want those? And the answer is always yes.
I don't know about the sound so much. For me, it's just about finding things that I haven't heard before.
Also, I'm probably not interested, but I probably have, I don't know, maybe about 10,000 CDs.
The same reasons it was fun to do in the 60s and 70s is the same reasons it's fun now. It's fun to dig for records. It's fun to take the time. It's fun to look at your collection that you've curated, whereas if you have 1,000 downloads or if you only stream, you've got music, that's good, but you don't have a collection of anything.